Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio, a Pan-African Nationalist and Warship network come to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
Picture Maxine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, you constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The True Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm saying that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and they're kind of, continuing to stay behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
It doesn't matter. If things go dumb down, it wouldn't matter what you abuse them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the matrix. They go through the world and get it in. So it don't matter.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never been economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is black and women.
The Cleaver Tea Show.
We start learning to fight that role, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they will let their brother go. They wait to see what black folks gonna do.
From the Kyrie Podcast.
Black people love kind folks that don't, that didn't, right? They're slavery, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, you like to say anything as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you praying to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Because generally, a welcoming of everyone, sometimes to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
Alright, sorry about that. Let's get into the program. like the sister just said, back into the program. Shout out to everybody who's here. Please like, subscribe, all that jazz. We're gonna get into this book. This is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. And we're just gonna try to read 30 pages right now. Nothing too serious. And so we're gonna go maybe about third way through. So technically the percentage I gave might have been wrong. By saying actually no, I don't know. Alright, so the French government had a cunning way of getting free labor by first demanding that African males should enlist as French soldiers and then using them as unpaid laborers. Okay? This is really interesting, okay? So the chapter I'm on for my book is strategy. And that was a really hard chapter to start because, one, I wasn't sure, because somebody once asked me, and I agree with them, they said, could you write a book without quoting other people? But when it comes to strategy, it's really hard to not quote the legendary, I shouldn't say legendary, but this particular Eurasian, who explains strategy, all warfare is based on deception, right? That said, I do end up quoting this person, but I say that to say it was really hard to write this paragraph because how do you explain strategy, which is broader than explaining warfare? And eventually I do give an explanation, but obviously, let's table that conversation for when you have the book. Although it should be in the free preview too. So even if you're like, hey, look, I don't want to buy this book, Like this should be in the free preview. The books, you know how I do. I do books with free previews because why not? That said, yeah, this is a part of strategy. Part of strategic thinking is get. I'll say the key word is mislead people. You know what I mean? Like when he says all warfare is based off deception and he explains it, he's really saying mislead people. Like that's part of strategy too. And everybody knows this. You know? Let me see. Somebody's Pole Nahangarea. Oh yeah. They're yeah, so anyway, so let's go. This and other forced labor legislation known as prestation was extensively applied in vast areas of French Sudan and French Equatorial Africa. For those who don't know right now, French Equatorial Africa are having fun. Let's say. So because cash crops are not well established in those areas, the main method of extracting surplus is by taking the population and making it work in plantation or cash crop regions near the coast. Present-day Upper Volta, Chad, and Congo, Brazzaville were huge suppliers of forced labor under colonialism. So they call these guys soldiers, and they just work them, right? Like kind of like slaves, right? Forced labor, forced. I think say underpaid, yeah, unpaid forced labor, rose by any other name, right? So I think that's a real quote. Okay. The French got Africans to start building the Brazzaville to Pointe-Noire Railway in 1921, and it was not completed until 1933. Every year of its construction, some 10,000 people were driven to the site, sometimes from more than 1,000 kilometers away. At least 25% of the labor force died annually from starvation and disease, the worst period being from 1922 to 1929. Can you imagine that? 10,000 people a year. No, sorry. 2,500 people a year dying to build this stupid railway. And the railway is not for you. And this is the thing that we don't really pay attention to, that there is a huge labor cost when it comes to developing the infrastructure in Africa. A huge labor cost, right? But nobody's willing to pay it because the way how these Wazungu afforded it was not only did they have capital, but they were basically killing people. And it's like, yeah, you go to Africa, you're like, man, you guys need to develop your infrastructure. Yeah, but at what cost? One of the things that people don't realize is that America used to be a lot of dense forest. You can't find a forest in America. Okay, I'll have to look up the map, honestly, because that might be a little bit of an exaggeration. But I don't know, actually. Anyway, I don't know, actually. But let me see if I could. I'm gonna look if I can find a map. Of America. Oh, I could even ask that thing. Before colonialism, I could even ask that Chat GPT. In the time since it was released. Okay, yeah, I'll show you guys. This looks like what I could show. This looks. Sometimes you gotta only show what verifies. Like you can't. Like if you're wrong, you just say I'm wrong. You don't waste time showing people. What in the freak? What is this? Oh, that's my book. No, that was the strategy thing. Shit. You see what I'm saying? Like I just. Like for some reason, this stuff is just so hard to navigate. Like, you just leave stuff open, and then... You know how it is. Alright, so... Let's see. Okay, so right here. So, I Googled, was America a dense forest before colonialism? It's like, before the settlers arrived, the United States had about 1 billion acres of forest, which covered about half of the country, including Alaska. In the time since 1600... it was reduced by about 286 million acres, an area roughly the size of Colombia, converted to mostly agricultural use. Okay, maybe I'm not sure. Maybe this is not what I was looking at. I thought it was reduced to 286, not by 286. But still, it's it says about 25% of the forest was cut down. And I guess this article says the first American settlers cut down millions of trees. Either way, what they said was that a lot of quote unquote slave labor, in America, was cutting down the forest, clearing the land. And obviously a lot of people didn't survive that undertaking. But that's what, like we don't process that when we talk about infrastructure building, because like for instance the Chinese make it look easy, because the Chinese have capital now, they make it look easy, but realistically, if you don't have the capital, it's a huge undertaking to just put roads forward. Like, yeah, if you have the machinery, but you got to remember that this is the 1600s. You see what I'm saying? This is the 1600s. They don't have the tractors and the steamrollers and all that kind of stuff. They have humans who do this stuff. And like humans aren't machines. But anyway, let's go back to the book. Yeah. I mean, it's fine that the book was. Let me see what you guys see in the book. Oh yeah, there's some. Damn, that's a lot. But anyway, I mean, it's fine. It's just a bunch of chapter names that you guys already should know. I kind of don't like when I accidentally show random windows, but I can't really do much about that. I know everybody's rewinding now, right? Kofi says greetings again. Peace, Kofi. How you doing? All right, so let's go back to the book. Where is this? All right, so yeah, we don't realize the toll. So he says, quite apart from the fact that the public works were of direct value to the capitalists, colonial government also aided private capitalists by providing them with labor recruited by force. This was particularly true in the early years of colonialism, but continued in varying degrees up to the Second World War and even to the end of colonialism in some places. In British territories, the practice was revived during the economic depression of 1929 to 33 and during the subsequent war. In Kenya and Tanganyika, forced labor was reintroduced to keep settlers' plantations functioning during the war. Tanganyika, forced labor was reintroduced to keep, that's Tanzania, where it was introduced to keep settlers' plantations functioning during the war. In Nigeria, it was the tin companies which benefited from the forced labor legislation, allowing them to get away with paying workers 5D per day plus rations. For most of the colonial period, the French government performed the same kind of service for the big timber companies who have great concessions of territory in Gabon and Ivory Coast. And this is the thing you have to realize too. I want people to realize, at any point, any government can introduce forced labor. At any point, any government can introduce forced labor. Because, you're in America, or, maybe not in America, but when you're in America, you might feel like, or like when you're in Europe, you might feel like, oh, there's no way, or they're not going to do it to me. Okay. You know what I mean? Okay. And I mean, look, realistically, like again, like there's a logistics behind everybody going under forced labor, right? But here's the thing that, here's the kicker. Forced labor is already in America. They just gotta put you in prison. Once they put you in prison, the logistics are perfectly fine. You got no other options. You got no protesting. You got nothing. You know what I'm saying? So it's not even a question of can they do it. You know what I mean? Because the reality is this, they can imprison you for anything. Now you might be like, no, they can't, and I can sue by Suva. Yeah, you could think that. But like I said it yesterday in the Shoot the Breeze. Make sure you guys check out Shoot the Breeze. I said, yeah, it's shorter, it's nice. In Shoot the Breeze, I said, look, the power with us is that we think we have rights. When you think you have rights, and that's what everybody wants you to believe. When you think you have rights, that's where you get into problems. Because you don't have rights. You know what I mean? Like like if I have somebody in my house, let's say, right? And again, if they, assuming they do not report it to anybody, I could slap them in their freaking face. Assuming I'm bigger than them too, right? Obviously. Just slap them in their face. What can they do about it? Nothing. Now, obviously, I am also not free. You see what I'm saying? So if they do report it to somebody who has authority over me, then, you know, I might get slapped in my own face and I can't do anything about it. Or I could do something about it and leave the earth afterward. Right? But that's the reality of the condition that you are in everywhere on the planet. And like I said, instead of trying, like what you have to do is you have to realize, hey, look, I just want to be under a government. I just want to be, under a government that, or a part of a government, but under a government, if not a part of a government, that is okay. That's it. But outside of that, anybody, and Huey Newton said this, you know. Now I finally listened to some Huey Newton, and I'm, you know, not necessarily saying that he's always right, but but Huey Newton said, you know, any people who are unarmed, any unarmed people are either slaves or subject to slavery at any point in time. And that's the truth. This is what we saw in Kenya. So he says the Portuguese and so for most of the colonial period, the French government performed the same kind of service for the big timber companies who had great concessions of territory in Gabon and Ivory Coast. The Portuguese and Belgian colonial regimes were the most brazen in directly rounding up Africans to go work for private capitalists under conditions equivalent to slavery. In Congo, brutal and extensive forced labor started under King Leopold in the last century. So many Congolese were killed and maimed by Leopold's officials and police that this earned European disapproval, even in the midst of the general pattern of colonial outrages. When Leopold handed over to the Belgian government in 1908, he had already made a huge fortune, and the Belgian government hardly relaxed the intensity of exploitation in Congo. And this is actually important because, you know, we're having a conversation on the TL. Well, I'm not really a part of it yet, but about Rwanda and its role in the Congo. And, you know, the question becomes, well, what should us African nation do about the Congo? And I think that's a worthwhile question that's not being explored. Anyway, so the Portuguese had a worse record of engaging in slavery-like practices, and they too have been repeatedly condemned by international public opinion. One peculiar characteristic of Portuguese colonialism was the provision of forced labor not only for its own citizens, but also for capitalists outside the boundaries of the colonies. Angolans and Mozambicans were exported to the South African mines to work for subsistence, while the capitalists in South Africa paid the Portuguese government a certain sum for each laborer supplied. The export of African to South African is still continuing. Let me actually open this thing on my phone so I could actually see the chat too, without clicking out. You know, just in case there's no chat. Then, like, there's no chat, there's no point in me taking up the. That's weird. I just got a notification for. Alright, in the above example, the Portuguese. Oh shit! It says it was removed by the. It says my video was removed. Alright, okay, Brother Makari's here. Peace, Brother Makari. Alright, so in the above example, the Portuguese colonialists were cooperating with capitalists of other nationalities to maximize the exploitation of African labor. Throughout the colonial period, there were instances of such cooperation as well as competition between metropolitan powers. Generally speaking, a European power was expected to intervene when the profit of its national bourgeoisie were threatened by the activities of other nations. After all, the whole purpose of establishing colonial governments in Africa was to provide protection to national monopoly economic interests. Thus, the Belgian government legislated to ensure the freight to and from the Congo would be mainly carried by Belgian shipping lines, and the French government placed high taxes on groundnuts brought into France by foreign ships, which was another way of ensuring the groundnuts from French Africa would be exported in French ships. In a sense, this means that Africans were losing their surplus through one straw rather than another. But it also meant that the sum total exploitation was also greater because of competition among Europeans were allowed. It would have brought down the cost of services and raised the price paid for agricultural products. Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's the thing. You're supposed to limit the competition. And I don't know if you guys peeped inside of the the preview of that accidental preview of that strategy thing. Let's see if it's accidental. But like, you want two things in strategy. You want two things. Now let's just finish this paragraph at least. All right. So Africans suffered more from exclusive trade with the mother country in cases where the mother country was backwards. African peasants and Portuguese colonies got lower prices for their crops and paid more for imported items. Yet Britain, the biggest of the colonies in Africa, were also facing competition from the more vigorous capitalists of Germany, the USA, and Japan. British merchants and industrialists lobbied their governments to erect barriers against competition. For example, Japanese cloth exports to British East Africa rose from 25 million yards in 1927 to 63 million yards in 1933, and this led Walter Runciman, president of the British Board of Trade, to get Parliament to import heavy tariffs on Japanese goods entering British colonies in Africa. This meant that Africans had to pay higher prices for a staple import, since British cloth was more expensive. From the viewpoint of the African peasant, the amount to further annihilate of the fruits of his labor. A perfect illustration. Yeah, let's not even go. Let's just read this. The perfect illustration of the identity of interest between the colonial governments and their bourgeois citizens were provided by the Conduct of Produce Marketing Board in Africa. The origins of the board go back to the Gold Coast cocoa holdup of 1937. For several months, cocoa farmers refused to sell their crops unless the price was raised. One apparently favorable result of the holdup was the British government agreed to set up a marketing board to purchase cocoa from the peasants in places of big business interests like the UAC and Cadbury, which had been up until then been the buyers. A West African Cocoa Control Board was set up in 1938, but the British government used this as a bush to hide the private capitalists and to allow them to continue making their exorbitant profits. In theory, and again, like the thing about the socialists is that it's like they're so against profits, but they don't understand why somebody would be, like, why another person would be for profits. You know? I mean, it's like they believe in this universality of humanity. You know? Like, actually, I'll tell you guys, like, one of the weirdest tweets I've seen recently was from that brother on Twitter. It was really weird. I'm going to read it to you guys. I can't show it to you guys, but I'm going to read it to you. Realm of the Bush is here. Peace, Realm of the Bush. That's Cassandra Cheeks. Peace to her. But let me read to you guys this weird tweet, because it's just like, what are you talking about, my guy? This guy. He's kind of on the popular side. Negro subversive. Let me see. He has like 9,000 followers, which is 3 times as much as me, by the way. So it's not that bad. So he goes, look here. He says, so somebody said last year, by the way, someone last year in November 14th, 2022 says, when did y'all realize we can't save all our people? So he decided to respond yesterday, I guess. Yeah, yesterday. He decided to respond. He says, when I think of people we can't save, I think of the rich and powerful who ally with white supremacy and are extremely well compensated for doing so. Your Condoleezza Rice's and Barack Obama's. But that's not typically who folk are talking about when they talk like this. And then I guess he continues. He says, my operating assumption is that anybody catching hell in the system can be saved to some degree. If I'm wrong, fine. But folks are brainwashed and damaged. That's the game. Talking about regular folks we can't save is a waste of air if you actually give a shit. And so it's like, okay, but who is trying to? So I was like, look, save Condoleezza Rice and Barack Obama from what? This doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean? And then he responded to me. He says, being a stooge for white supremacy is a fate I personally would not want, but they clearly love it and fought mightily to be in that position and unlikely to be persuaded otherwise. Hope I clear things up. Now, obviously, he didn't clear things up because what in the world is he talking about? So basically what he's saying is that the people who need to be saved are the Condoleezza Rice's and Barack Obama's, the rich and powerful, who are extremely well compensated with their alliance in white supremacy. And it that's the socialist. I think this guy's a liberal, honestly, but that's the socialist or even liberal crux of everything, where it's just so confusing, where it's like, I want to save the rich and powerful from themselves. Like what? Like I don't like what? And that's like where we are as a people. So like this socialist guy, he's just like it's just this weird universal humanitarianism where it's just like, I don't think the French, like the French go to Africa and they get a big profit for themselves, right? Okay, but like that's what you're supposed to do if you're a human being. I don't like it either, but I'm not going to say that a human being wouldn't seek to go somewhere to profit. You know, it reminds me of this other conversation I saw with this sister, Amma. She's a cool sister. She was having this conversation where somebody was talking about, like I guess the mayor of some city was talking about, hey guys, can you stop shoplifting? Otherwise, we're gonna lose these businesses in our area, right? And so Amma's like, oh look, there's a negative consequence. There's a negative consequence to shoplifting. And somebody like a socialist is like, I don't believe there's a negative consequence because these people have insurance. And it's like, and everybody's trying to explain to her, well, look, you know, the socialists, they're trying to explain, hey, look, if their profits are dwindling, they're probably, like, if they don't have profits in that store location, they'll probably close down that store. And the socialist is like, I refuse to believe that they're not receiving profits after, like, heavy shoplifting. And it's like, what? You know, like what? It's just, a lot of it is really confusing. That's all I can say. It's like a lot of it, like a lot of what's passing for knowledge at this point is really, really confusing. Yeah, Robin the Butcher's like, save them from white supremacy. Like, but like, I feel like they're the last people I care about saving. You know what I mean? Maybe like, I don't know what he's saying. Honestly, I don't know what he's saying. Because like I don't like they don't even want, like they're like the enemy. You get what I'm saying? Or at least the way how he's describing it, it seems like he's trying to, like, it's just weird. Like, I don't understand him. But anyway, let's go. In theory, a marketing board was supposed to pay the peasant a reasonable price for his crop. The board sold the crop overseas and kept a surplus for the improvement of agriculture and for paying the peasants a stable price if world market prices declined. In practice, the boards paid peasants a low fixed rate during many years when world prices were rising. None of the benefits went to Africans, but rather to the British government itself and to the private companies, which were used as intermediaries in the buying and selling of the produce. Big companies like the UAC and John Holt were given quotas to fulfill on behalf of the boards. As agents of the government, they were no longer exposed to direct attack, and their profits were secure. And this is the thing about Pan-Africanism. I want people to understand this. What Pan-Africanism would do in this situation is be that buyer. You know? Like, basically, you could do this. Wait, where is it? Yeah, you could do this. You could be the board. Pan-Africanism could be the board that pays peasants a fixed rate, even if it's a low fixed rate, right? While the world prices are rising. And then keep that profit in the hands of the Pan-African governments, as opposed to the British government. You know, if you could guarantee other people fixed wages, right? So the socialist says, oh, that's a bad thing. You know, world prices are going up, or wages are going up, but you're giving me a fixed wage, right? Or you know, profits are going up, but you're giving me a fixed wage. That's a bad thing. And it's like, no, a fixed wage is actually a good thing. A fixed wage means that if the prices are going down, you still get something. You know, it's kind of like the volatility of the crypto market, right? Or even the stock market or whatever market, right? There's a difference between, like, the bank offering you a low fixed rate is better than, well, not better than, but there's more security in a low fixed rate than there is in a volatile. You know, oh, today I make this much money, tomorrow I lose that much more money. Right? So the low fixed rate is a good thing to offer people. Obviously, some people do want the volatility. But I mean, and that's something that everybody has a right. They're not again, I don't go to rights, but you get what I'm saying? Like, I can understand if people want that. But essentially, like, just complaining that you get a fixed rate. Now, obviously, it could be a really low fixed rate. But I think the socialists, like again, they're kind of just against profit, but it's like I think you want to understand how people get profits or what services people offer so that we can also offer services. And we can't just condemn it as, oh, it's exploitation, because then that means that we shouldn't do it. But then it becomes, well, we can't actually accumulate wealth. And then, of course, in times of low prices or times of volatility, people will suffer more so than if they had fixed rates. You know what I mean? Anyway, so I don't use air conditioners, by the way, so I just turned my fan on to oscillate. All right, so the idea of the marketing boards gained support from top British policymakers because the war came just at that time, and the British government was anxious to take steps to secure certain colonial products in the necessary quantities and at the right times, given the limited number of ships available for commercial purposes during war. They were, because obviously Wazungu, I mean, you're at war, somebody else could shoot down your ships. You know what I mean? Somebody else could harass your merchants and the trading prices and so on and so forth, or the trading prices could go up. It's not like you have to look at the world in a geopolitical lens and not simply, oh man, we're suffering at the bottom. Like, yeah, of course, everybody's like, millions of lives are being lost. And granted, it's because the Europeans are idiot savages, but even so, like, millions are lost. So they were also anxious to save private capitalists who were adversely affected by events connected with the war. For example, East African sisal became a vital importance to Britain and her war allies after the Japanese cut off supplies of similar haired fibers from the Philippines and Dutch East Indies. Actually, even before fighting broke out, sisal was bought in bulk by the British government to help the non-African plantation owners in East Africa who had lost markets in Germany and other parts of Europe. Similarly, oilseeds such as palm produce and groundnuts were bought by a board from September 1939 in preparation for shortages of butter and marine oils. With regard to all peasant cash crops, the produce marketing boards made purchases at figures that were way below world market prices. For instance, the West African Produce Board paid Nigerians 16.15 for a ton of palm oil in 1946, and soon that through the Ministry of Food for 95, which was nearer to the world market price. Groundnuts, which received 15 per ton when bought by the board, was sold in Britain at 110 per ton, 110 pounds per ton. Furthermore, export duties were levied on the board's sales by the colonial administrators, and that was an indirect tax on the peasants. The situation reached a point where many peasants tried to escape from under the boards. In Sierra Leone in 1952, the price for coffee was so low that growers smuggled their crops into nearby French territories. The price for coffee was so low that growers smuggled their crops into nearby French territories. At about the same time, Nigerian peasants were running away from palm oil into collection of timber felling, which did not come under the jurisdiction of the produce boards. If one accepts the government is always the servant of a particular class, it is certainly understandable that the colonial governments should have been in collusion with capitalists to siphon out surplus from Africa to Europe. Okay, so this is probably what it is. But even if one does not start from that Marxist premise, it would be impossible to ignore the evidence of how the colonial administrators worked as committees on behalf of the big capitalists. The governors in the colonies had to listen to the local representative of the companies and their principals. Indeed, there were company representatives who wielded influence in several colonies at the same time. Before the First World War, the single most important individuals in the whole of British West Africa was Sir Alfred Jones, chairman of the Elder Dempster Line, chairman of the Bank of the West Africa, president of the British Cotton Growing Association. In French West Africa in the late 1940s, the French governor showed himself very anxious to please one Marc Roucart, a man with major interest in several of the French trading companies. Such examples could be cited for each colony throughout its history, although in some of them the influence of the white settlers was greater than that of the individual metropolitan businessmen. So this is actually a really important paragraph, okay? One is this. If one accepts that government is always the servant of a particular class, it is perfectly understandable that the colonial government should have been in collusion with the capitalists to siphon off surplus from Africa to Europe. Now, this is where it is. This is the crux of the issue with the socialists. Okay? Because look what he says. He says, look. He says, this is the Marxist understanding. He says, Marxism teaches us that government is always the servant of the elite. Okay? Government is always the servant of the elite. That's what he says. It teaches us that. And it's true. It's true. Here's the problem. What the Marxists is doing is they're saying, but we can do a government that isn't a servant to the elite. And that's where it's false. You see what I'm saying? And that's where the imagination and the reality do not intersect. And when you have this imagination of, well, let's have a class, let's have a government that is servant to, let's say, the underclass. Let's have a government that's servant to the proletariat, right? You know, they call it the dictatorship of the proletariat. Let's have that. When you have that and you have people believing that, all of a sudden everything else becomes confusing. Because here's another important thing. He says, look, there's this one guy, Alfred Jones, right? He's the chairman of this, Dempster Lines, chairman of the Bank of West Africa, president of the British Growing Cotton Growing Association, right? And then there's this other guy in France. Apparently he's in France, Marc Roucart. These are the two freaking elites. One of them in British West Africa, one of them in French West Africa, right? Two elites, right? And they're engaging each other, and that's of importance. But when you have the socialist mindset, when you're like, hey, look, the only people, government is for, it's like you completely confuse yourself. Instead of just accepting the reality and saying, oh, well, you know what? That means that we as African people should maybe try to become a part of a particular class. Right? We say, no, this is wrong, and now we don't like people of a particular class. We don't think, it's just a lot of confusion, and for what? Like, what's the game? So I think it's a pretty interesting section. Now, I think I should check the chat to see if anybody... No, it's no chat. All right, so... But, yeah, it's a pretty interesting share. So company shareholders in Europe not only lobbied Parliament, but actually controlled the administration itself. The chairman of the Cocoa Board within the Ministry of Food was none other than John Cadbury, a director of Cadbury Brothers, who were participants in the buying pool while exploiting West African cocoa farmers. Now, if anybody knows, there's such a thing as Cadbury chocolate. I think they do Easter eggs. I don't know. But former employees of Unilever, and Unilever, again, is that one in the Congo that, pretty much killed Lumumba, held key positions in the oils and fat divisions of the Ministry of Food and continued to receive checks from Unilever. The oil and fat division handed over the allocation of buying quotas for the produce board to the Association of the West African Merchants, which is dominated by Unilever's subsidiary, the UAC. It is no wonder that the Ministry of Food sent a prominent Lebanese businessman a directive that he had to sign an agreement drawn up by the UAC. It is no wonder that the company had government aid in keeping prices down in Africa and in securing forced labor where necessary. It is no wonder that Unilever then sold salt, margarine, etc. at profitable prices within a market assured by the British government. I think Unilever is the one, but they keep saying it's British, so I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But no. Mineral, something like that. Union Mineral is the one that killed Lumumba. Unilever, I think this one is in Nigeria. Anyway, so of course the Metropolitan government also ensured that a certain proportion of the colonial surplus went directly into the coffers of the state. They all had some form of direct investment in capitalist enterprises. The Belgian government was an investor in mining, and so too was the Portuguese government through its part ownership of the Angolan Diamond Company. The French government was always willing to associate itself with the financial sector. When colonial banks were in trouble, they could count on rescue from the French government. Indeed, a proportion of their shares passed into the hands of the French government. The British government was perhaps the least anxious to become directly involved in everyday business enterprises. Well, it did run the eastern Nigerian coal mines apart from railways. Marketing boards helped the colonizing power to get in hands on some immediate cash. One finds that the cocoa board sold to the British Ministry of Food at very low prices, and the ministry in turn sold to British manufacturers, making a profit that was as high as 11 million in some years. More important still, the board sold to the USA, which was the largest market and one where prices were very high. None of the profits went back to the African farmers, but instead represented British foreign exchange in American dollars. So that's the role America was playing in this colonial endeavor. And what's interesting is that even back then, America was considered the largest market where prices were very high. Like they paid good money, and that's something that we don't really take into account. But literally, America probably does pay good money to people who are selling things, right? And in fact, actually, you see that in Africa right now. So I got this sister who makes dresses, right? And I don't know how much she sells them for, but they're not. She doesn't sell them for that high, for that much, right? Yeah, she doesn't sell them for that high. But she showed me somebody else who makes wedding dresses in America. There are dresses in America that sell for like thousands of dollars. Or bags and dresses, just random things, just sells for thousands of dollars. She's not selling anything for thousands of dollars. And even her people are telling her, hey, it's too cheap. Like, it's too expensive how she sells. So it's like, yeah, America is just a higher prices in their market. And that's something that we don't really take into account. Technically, I feel like I wouldn't mind if she did sell abroad. But again, I don't know how that could happen. So let's see. From 1943, Britain and USA... Oh, sorry. There's a comment. So the comment is from Ua Abuntum. He says, greetings. I'm on bus back to Jacksonville. The Gullah Geechee Historical Corridor Vice Chairman recognized Gullah Geechee as a branch of Igbo Nation. Now we organize citizenship based on kingdoms and Thai Karakoman. Don't know how good StreamYard is for real movement, but we moving. Yeah. Okay, so Ua Abuntum says he's going back to Jacksonville, and he Igbo Nation was recognized. Gullah Geechee were recognized for the Igbo Nation, so that's pretty good news. All right, so let's go. So from 1943, Britain and the USA engaged in what we known as River Lend Lease. This meant that wartime United States loans to Britain were repaid partly by raw materials shipped from British colonies to the USA. Tin and rubber from Malaya were very important in the context, while Africa supplied a wide range of products, both mineral and agricultural. Cocoa was third as a dollar earner after tin and rubber. 1947, West African cocoa brought over $100 million, 38 million pounds, to the British dollar balance. Besides having a virtual monopoly on the production of diamonds, South Africa was able to sell to the USA and earn dollars for Britain. In 1946, Harry F. Oppenheimer told his fellow directors of the De Beers Consolidated Mine that sale of gem diamonds during the war secured about 300 million American dollars for Great Britain. So that's actually pretty interesting. You see this name, Oppenheimer. There's a movie. I don't think it's about him, like this guy, but it's but you notice the name, like you notice the families. I don't remember the guy's name from Oppenheimer, but I just forgot it. Probably because I didn't watch the movie, and I haven't been in the physics class for a decade. But yeah, it was on this very issue of currency that the colonial government did the most manipulations to ensure that the Africans' wealth was stashed away in the coffers of the metropolitan state. In the British colonial sphere, coins and notes were first issued through private banks. Then this function was taken over by the West African Currency Board and the East African Currency Board, established in 1912 and 1919, respectively. The currency issued by the Boers and their colonies had to be backed by sterling reserves, which was money earned by Africa. The manner in which the systems worked was as follows. When a colony earned a foreign exchange, mainly through exports, these earnings were held in the Britain in pounds sterling. An equivalent amount of local East or West African currency was issued for circulation in the respective colonies, while the sterling was invested in British government stock, thereby earning even more profit for Britain. The commercial banks worked hand in hand with the metropolitan government and the currency boards to make the system work. Together they established an intricate financial network which served the common end of enriching Europe at Africa's expense. The contribution to sterling. So again, obviously, like I don't know, it's hard to tell. Like again, the reverse of this, enriching Africa at Europe's expense, right? Like that seems to be what people imagine Europeans would do, but it just goes against common sense. Like it just goes against common sense, and I think that's something that that's an underrated, that's an underrated sentiment, you know. But all right, so the contribution to sterlings reserved by any colony was a gift to the British Treasury, for which the colony received little interest. By the end of the 1950s, the sterling reserves of a small colony like Sierra Leone has reached £60 million, while in 1955 the British government was holding $210 million derived from the sale of cocoa and minerals from Gold Coast. Egypt and the Sudan were also heavy contributors to Britain. Africa's total contribution to Britain's sterling balance in 1945 was $446 million, which went up to $1,446 million by 1955, more than half the total gold and dollar reserve of Britain and the Commonwealth, which then stood at, let's say, 2,120,000,000 men like Arthur Creech Jones and Oliver Littleton, major figures in British colonial policymaking, admitted that the early 1950s Britain was living on the dollar earnings of the colonies. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, again, this is a lot of information. But it's what are you trying to say? You know what I mean? So are you saying that the British government profited from colonialism? You know, it's like a in-depth, so it's good as a resource of, oh, look, these are the people who, this is how and who profited from colonialism. But it's yeah, you're supposed to profit from colonialism. I mean, it's a sad fact, but that's what humans have done. As long as we know of, as long as human history is. And by human history, I mean history, not prehistory. So maybe prehistorical man did not profit from other men. We don't know because it's prehistory. But as far as history is concerned, yeah, you had people who were colonizing other people and profiting. And I mean, it sucks that it's us, obviously, but I don't particularly know. I don't know anybody who doesn't know that England profited from colonialism. You know, I mean, obviously we don't know these small details or these details or these numbers, but yeah, you know, yeah. So the British, so the British government was outdone by its Belgian counterpart in exacting tribute from its colonies, especially during and after the last war. After Belgium was overrun by the Germans, a government in exile was set up in London. The colonial secretary of that exiled regime, Mr. Goding, admitted that during the war, the Congo was able to finance all the expenditures of the Belgian government in London, including the diplomatic service, as well as the cost of our armed forces in Europe and Africa, a total of some £40 million. In fact, thanks to the resources of the Congo, the Belgian government in London had not to borrow a shilling or a dollar, and the Belgian gold reserve could be left intact. And this is so important. This is so important. I mean, this is so important just as a lesson in life. I mean, obviously, again, the Belgian profited from colonialism. We know this. But just as a tactic in life, you want your income to provide for your life, so that you don't have to touch your savings. Now, obviously, your income, if you're Belgian and your income is coming from, the exploitation, from the Congo, then we frown upon that. But that's the way of unfortunately, that's the way of life. You have to be strong or you'll be weak. You have to be strong in the face of other strengths, or they may impose on you. And it's maybe you don't want, maybe the strong shouldn't impose on the weak. Okay? Maybe. But if they do, what are you going to do about it? And that's where it really comes back to. It's like if some guy is talking shit to me, and then obviously you could say, Oni, you shouldn't hit this person, right? And that's true. It's true. But I punched him in the face. Now what? What are you going to do about it? Nothing? If that's your answer to it, I just think it's wrong. Well, good for you. I got my satisfaction. I got my satisfaction. So it really comes back to, the important thing is get your income, right? So that you don't have to even touch your savings. Obviously get savings, but getting income. This is the thing that I'm trying to do when I get to Africa. I'm trying to secure income. And yeah, I'll probably secure an income off of people in Africa, obviously. Or maybe even people in America. Who knows? If I sell my books, and again, my book selling is a good thing. It's a noble thing. So it's not like I'm hurting anybody. I'm just giving them a lot of information for a little price. But what I'm saying is that if I could supply for my lifestyle while I'm abroad, that's a good thing. Now, obviously, I don't agree with Wazungu doing it, but obviously Wazungu agrees with Wazungu doing it. So it's almost of no moment. Let me turn off my phone for a second. Let me just turn off the audio on my phone, because it just keeps, for some reason I'm popular. I'm only popular when I'm podcasting. Since the war, surplus of earnings by the Congo and currencies other than the Belgian franc have all accrued to the National Bank of Belgium. Therefore, quite apart from all the private capitalists looted from Congo, the Belgian government is also a direct beneficiary to the tune of millions of francs per annum. To discuss French colonialism in the context would be largely to repeat remarks made with reference to the British and Belgians. Guinea was supposedly a poor country, but in 1952, it earned 1 billion francs, or about $5.6 million in foreign exchange, based on the sale of bauxite, coffee, and bananas. French financial techniques were slightly different from other colonial powers. France tended to use the commercial banks more rather than set up separate currency boards. France also squeezed more out of Africans by imposing levies for military purposes. The British government dressed Africans in French army uniform and used them to fight other Africans, to fight other colonialized people like the Vietnamese, and to fight in European wars. The colonial budget had to bear the cost of sending these African French soldiers to die, but if they returned alive, they had to be paid pensions out of Africans' funds. To sum up briefly, colonialism meant a great intensification of exploitation within Africa, to a level much higher than the previously in existence under colonialism or feudal type African societies. Simultaneously, it meant the export of the surplus is massive proportion, for that was the central purpose of colonialism. Yep. So again, this is 2.2. It's supposed to be 5.2 because we're on chapter 5. But anyway, 5.2, the strengthening of the technological and military aspect of capitalism, a preliminary examination of the non-monetary benefits of colonialism to Europe. So again, the Europeans went to Africa to benefit themselves. That just makes a lot of sense. You don't travel 5,000 miles to not benefit yourself. And it's or 5,000 kilometers or whatever. to not benefit yourself. And it's like, we have to come to terms with that. You know, when I go to Africa, I'm looking to benefit myself too. You know, and that's what you're supposed to do. Like, it's going to cost me how many thousands of dollars, right? And then, like, how many thousands of dollars? Because one, I have to get a ticket, which is already, you know, thousands of dollars, if you will, right? But then I have to buy a house. I have to buy, if it's not furnished, I have to buy furniture, right? I have to get a new TV. I have to get a new blah, blah, blah. I got to get blah, 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 right? I have to do so much in order to live there, and it's going to cost me. And it's like, well, how do I replenish those costs? Right? How can I replenish those costs while I'm there? And not just replenish those costs, but how can I make a profit while I'm there? Now, already, I still don't know how to do that, which is okay. It's fine. But, like, yeah, do I want to make a profit while I'm in Africa? Absolutely. Do I want to just spend my money and go there and then, oh, I don't know what to do? No. And so you have Wazungu, who has much more capital than us. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go to Africa, but I want to profit. I want this to somehow benefit me. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you might say, well, fuck you, cracker. I don't blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. I get it. He said, your fans calling during stream. Oh, yeah, okay, sure. I thought you meant my fan. Brother Makari says, and they still benefiting themselves from African people worldwide. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like that's the thing about the human experience is that, yeah, like technically you should strive to benefit from other people. Because if you're not benefiting from other people, you're just losing. Like I could tell you guys, I have this let's say I give somebody, I don't know how to say it, but anyway, but like let's say I provide somebody with a service and they didn't pay me. Right? And they don't pay me. And it's like, that sucks for me. Because I'm giving you a service and I'm not getting anything in return. And I mean, most people will tell me, hey, well, then you got to just stop giving this person this service. Well, let's say I'm giving this person this service continually. Right? They say, well, then you just can't give this person this service anymore. Or somehow get your benefit. And that's just the way of life. You know? The way of life is that you're supposed to benefit from the other person. Now, granted, you know, again, we don't like for Europeans to benefit, but again, we're not Europeans. So if we were Europeans, we would think that Europeans should benefit. And the thing is that because we're yeah, it's like, and then you just have to go, like, you could go into the mindset of, okay, well, how are they thinking? Because again, we're not even there. This was in 1950. This was before I was born. We're not here. But what we can say is that, yeah, the person in question, the European in question, probably thought, let me benefit. You know? Brother Makari says, Oni, you should go to Africa to benefit yourself. That's cool, but you should also benefit the people there. You shouldn't have a European mind. Yeah, I mean, you do benefit you can. Again, I think the way the European, the thing is, between us and them, us and the European is this. The European did not look at you as a human. Okay? So, when he does not and did not look at you as a, like, you gotta remember that the European, like, they're not your friend. You know what I mean? So I go to Africa, I'll make friends. You know what I mean? And I'll treat my friends good, and I'll look for mutual benefit between me and my friends. Okay? The European has no responsibility like that. You know, he's not your friend. This guy has farms, right? We all have farms. Let's say we all have farms, right? This guy has farms with 10,000 cows, and he kills 200 a day. No, like he just puts them on a conveyor belt and bashes their skull in with machines every day. He's not going like you might have, your 5 cows or whatever, and you're treating them all good, and then, come time, one of them breaks their leg or is too heavy or just median, whatever. You might kill them and eat them and have a ceremony and, praise, whatever. They're not like that. They have 10,000 of these things. Okay? And they're bashing their skulls in machines. No tenderness, no nothing. Just bash their skull next, bash the skull next, bash the skull. They're not looking at people at all. They're looking at profits purely. Now, I'm not going to Africa to look for profits purely. You know what I mean? Part of me wants to build a family, get my life together, get a wife, that kind of stuff. Get a wife, get a life, but just, be able to afford these things. Be able to, like, let's say I have a wife, right? She has to eat. You know what I mean? Like, she might not be working. She might need me to provide for her, and so I will provide for her. But, like, can I get an income while I'm in Africa is the question. This white boy's not worried about that shit. He has a wife in Europe. Okay? He has a wife in Europe. He's just there to make money and bring it back to Europe. I'm there to make money and spread it among our people in Africa. To provide good services, good products, and spread it among and spread the reward of the money to our people. And that's where it's just fundamentally different. We're not connecting the dots in the sense of, it's like, what if I went to Europe? I go to Europe, I'm not interested in finding a wife. Okay? I'm not interested in helping out the people there. So what I'm interested in doing is just getting money and taking the resources out. I'm interested in profit when I go to Europe. Just like in America, I'm interested in profit when I'm in America. Now, granted, maybe I'm friendly to, African Americans or African Europeans or whatever, or whatever you want to call them, Afro-British or whatever, I don't even call them. But maybe I'm friendly to them. But like, yeah, when I'm in another person's nation or I'm in another person's territory, I'm interested in profit. And when I'm in my own territory, I'm interested in community. And so I think that's where it comes back to. It's like, I don't think it's even a European mindset as much as it's like I said, if you're in Africa, if you're in Europe and you're not looking at it like, let me just get profit and get the fuck out of here, right? Then you fell for the trick. You fell for the propaganda. You get what I'm saying? Maybe that's probably a little clear. White folk been telling them. Kofi says white folk been telling them. Yep. But anyway, let's keep going. A preliminary examination of the the non-monetary benefits. So there are still some bourgeois propagandists who assert that colonialism was not a paying concern for Europeans. Now, okay, stop listening to them. Nobody cares. Just like everybody knows it was. Anyway, there are those who say the slave trade was not profitable to Europeans. All right. It is not worthwhile to engage in a direct refutation of such a viewpoint, since it consumes time which could otherwise be more usefully employed. He's going to do it anyway. The foregoing section was a statement on the level of actual monetary profit made by colonial powers out of Africa, but Africa's contribution to European capitalism was far greater than mere monetary returns. Colonial system permitted the rapid development of technology and skills within the metropolitan sectors of imperialism. It also allowed for the elaboration of the modern organizational techniques of the capitalist firm and of imperialism as a whole. Indeed, colonialism gave capitalism an added lease of life and prolonged its existence in Western Europe, which had been the cradle of capitalism. At the beginning of the colonial period, science and technology as applied to production already had a firm base inside of Europe, a situation which was itself connected to overseas trade, as previously explained. Europe was entering the age of electricity. This is the age that you want to be at, of advanced ferrous and non-ferrous metallurgy and a proliferation of manufactured chemicals. All of these were carried to great heights during the colonial periods. Electronical devices were raised to the qualitatively new level of electronics. electrical devices became electronics, incorporating miniaturization of equipment, fantastic progress in telecommunications, and the creation of computers. His brother was right in 1973, and he's talking about computers. That's crazy. Chemical industries were producing a wide range of synthetic substitute for raw materials, and a whole new branch of petrochemicals had come into existence. The combination of metals by metallurgic innovations meant that products could be offered to meet far-reaching demands of heat resistance, lightness, tensile strength, etc. At the end of the colonialism, say 1960, Europe was on the verge of another epic, that of nuclear power. So actually, in my book, I'm going to talk about technology, and I had this alliteration back in the day where I said, you got to study man, money, machines, molecules, and minerals, right? The trouble is this: it's a nice alliteration in English. It's not a nice alliteration in Swahili or in any other language. So I said, let me get rid of that alliteration and let me focus on two technologies that I felt like encompassed everything, which was machines and energy, right? Because you kind of want to talk about nuclear energy without talking about nuclear energy. But then I also said, no, I think I was cleaning out my toilet or something, and I was like, damn, bleach is so freaking good. like I know bleach is not good for the skin, but damn, I mean, you could put that thing. I was I was tempted to brag about bleach because it's just so good at, you could put it in your toilet and it cleans your toilet for you. Like no manual labor required, which is just like crazy. Like no manual labor outside of pouring it in your toilet. So I think that was pretty interesting. So then I added chemistry. So it's actually pretty interesting to see. So electronics, I'll put that in. So I don't know if I would actually put that in machines. I think maybe. Because people say devices and tools are different and so on and so forth. But like chemistry was the other thing that I was supposed to write on. Is chemistry, machines, and energy. But of course, like you see this is minerals. But I think the minerals are useful to the point that they're added to machines. And of course, chemistry is molecules. But again, it's interesting to the point of it's in chemistry. So that's an interesting passage. I feel like I actually want to highlight it just in case, in the future when I'm trying to look for it, I can find it. Anyway, so that's it. So it is common knowledge that the gap between the output of the metropoles and that of the colonies increased by at least 15 to 20 times during the epoch of colonialism. More than anything else, it was the advance of scientific techniques in the metropoles which was the cause of the great gulf between the African and Western European levels of productivity by the end of the colonial period. Therefore, it is essential to understand the role of colonialism itself in bringing about the scientific progress of the metropoles and its application to industry. So again, he's like, hey, the Europeans, they became more technological because they exploited us. Like, oh my gosh. Like, it's just like everything, It's just like everything. It's just like what do you want from these people? So it would be extremely simple-minded to say that colonialism in Africa or anywhere else caused Europe to develop its science and technology. Yeah, that's what it sounded like you were saying. And it is extremely simple-minded. But go on. The tendency towards technological innovation and renovation was inherent in capitalism itself because of the drive for profits. However, it would be entirely accurate to say that colonization of Africa and other parts of the world formed an indispensable link in a chain of events which made possible the technological transformation of the base of European capitalism. Without that link, European capitalism would not have been producing goods and services at the level attained in 1960. In other words, our very yardstick for measuring developed and undeveloped nations would have been different. So again, it's one of those, hey, we built your country. We built, this is it. We built European technology because they had to sell us goods. Like, shut up. No disrespect to the ancestor. I shouldn't tell the ancestor to shut up. Plus, I'm reading his book, so it's not like he's really talking to me. But like, damn, the reason why I'm rolling my eyes is because it's okay when he said it. I don't know if people were saying it when he said it, but we are now the descendants of this rhetoric. So this sort of view of, oh, we built America, or oh, we built capitalism. African colonies built American technology. Because we became that sort of rhetoric where it's like you're not really the agent, and yet you're taking credit for the agent because the agent, like I can't do it. I can't. So profits from African colonialism mingled with profits from every other source to finance scientific research, right? So they stole the money from you, or not stole the money from you. Really, they didn't even steal the, like, again, what are profits in this case? The profits are, they get, let's say cotton. They get cotton from you, and then they sell cotton to their buddy, right? And they make an extreme profit from selling the cotton they get from you to their buddy. And they use that profit to finance their scientific research, and then you take credit. You say, well, if you didn't take that cotton from me to sell it to your buddy, then your buddy wouldn't have paid you that much money, and then you couldn't have put that money into science. Therefore, really, I put that money into science. And it's like, no, you didn't. We just bought cotton from you. We just exploited your labor. We just forced you to sell us cotton, or cocoa, or timber. That's it. You didn't guide. You didn't say, "Oh, let's do the financial research." You didn't even sell it to the other guy. I don't know if people understand what I'm saying when I say this example. I'm saying this way. Let's say let's use something else. Cocoa, right? Let's use cocoa. So cocoa is produced in Ghana, right? I think from trees or something. I don't know. I don't even know. But I don't go on cocoa farms, right? So let's say you can extract cocoa from, let's say, tree, or maybe plants. I don't know. But cocoa, but plants and trees are the same, whatever, right? But you get cocoa from Ghana, okay? Now you could sell that cocoa to England, or you could sell it to Sweden, okay? Or you could sell it to France, or you could sell it to Togo, right? England says you're selling it to me, right? Now you could sell that cocoa for, let's just give a random number, $2 a pound, or you could sell it for $10 a pound, or you could sell it for $15 a pound. Let's say Sweden is buying the cocoa for $15 a pound. So now you're in Ghana. Do you have connections with Sweden? Not even remotely. And even if you did have connections with Sweden, Britain says you're selling to me for $2. Okay? Now you can't do anything about it. You could do something about it, but you don't, right? Or you're not willing to do what it takes, right? So you sell the cocoa to Britain for $2 a pound. But remember, Sweden is buying cocoa for $15 a pound. So Britain sells the cocoa it bought for $2 a pound to Sweden for $15 a pound. Okay? So it makes way more profit from the cocoa. Okay? Now, after you got screwed over in that deal, that little exchange, that triangle trade, right? You get screwed over. You then say, well, if you didn't take from me, you wouldn't have had good science. Nobody cares. You got screwed over. And I mean, that sucks. And I don't like being screwed over, obviously. But again, remember, this is the 19 so on and so forth. So it's not really you per se, but it is your ancestors. I don't like being screwed over. But you got to understand, you did not finance their thing. It just happens that because you never sold to Sweden. And you had no chance of selling to Sweden. You know what I mean? Like you in Sweden did not have a it's not your profit if you have, like, if there's no indication that you were selling to Sweden, or even if you were selling to Sweden, the reality is that you should have, if you were selling to Sweden, then you should have put your money into your defense. And not putting money into your defense means that now England could come in and say, well, now you're selling to me. You know, it's like, back in the day, you weren't supposed to talk about this particular gang. So I'll just keep to that tradition. But, like, it's like this particular gang in America where they give you protection fees. They go to businesses in the area and they say, look, your business is going to be protected if you pay us some money, and you pay us more money so that we don't trash your restaurant, pretty much, or trash your store, pretty much. But it's like, yeah, you when you get caught lacking, you get caught lacking. I don't know if that's intelligible, but I'll go on. The profits from British colonialism mingled with profits from every other source to finance scientific research. Yeah, so it's like, it's not really profits that you were giving. It was profits that they made because they had trade arrangements that you didn't. Or they had a trade arrangement with you, and they had a trade arrangement with another country, and you were just completely out of it. You were on the bottom. You were never going to get the profits. Like, Sweden was never going to buy from you. Or even if Sweden was going to buy from you, again, Britain says no. And because because Britain could tell you no, you like, there was nothing you could have done. There's no, you don't take credit for it. You just take the L. This is true in a general sense that the affluence of capitalist societies of the present century allowed more money and leisure for research. It is also true because the development of capitalism in the imperialist epoch continued the division of labor inside the capitalist metropole to the point where scientific research was a branch of the division of labor, and indeed one of its most important branches. European society moved away from scientific research as an ad hoc, personal, or even whimsical affair to a situation where research was given priority by governments, armies, and private capitalists. It was funded and guided. Careful scrutiny, and again, so the Europeans did something that's actually pretty beneficial to themselves. Pretty beneficial. Instead of science being, personal. I don't know what ad hoc means, so I'm not even gonna, whatever. Well, personal, I don't know Latin, okay? I know I got some critiques. I got some critics who are like, man, you don't know everything? And it's like, no, I don't know everything. Come on. Like, why would I know Latin? Anyway, so I barely even know Swahili. Why would I know Latin? So ad hoc, an whimsical affair. So like once upon a time, scientists were like, yo, look at this. And now it's like guided by money, research, like research funds. And it's like, yeah, it's funded and guided. And so did we have this? And like this is, again, the Europeans are showing you game. They're sharing with you game. And instead of the socialists looking at it like, oh, they're sharing us game, I see. They fund and guide their own scientists. That's what's up. We're just like, oh, look at them. They now science is funded and guided. Ugh. Like, what is wrong with you guys? So, yeah, by the way, so one of the points of this book, while I'm reading this book, because I never read it, obviously, and I feel like I should at least, because actually, this week, like, I haven't been reading much, so even this week, I only read a couple of pages of Challenge of the Congo, so, like, sometimes it's just good to devote yourself to some reading, so I'm actually glad that you guys stuck by, just stick around, even though it's not too many people. I'm just glad that you guys are here, because it's like, yeah, sometimes you just read. You should just read a book, and it's actually harder to read these days. Even off camera, it's kind of harder to read because it's like if you don't have to, a lot of times you don't. Now maybe you guys obviously have better discipline because nobody else is reading off camera. I mean on camera. But like for me, it's just a little bit harder because sometimes you hear I get pissed when I'm reading this stuff. Like I don't want to read this because I'm like, this is socialist stupidity. The white boy is putting game, and instead of you getting game, you're complaining. Anyway, careful scrutiny reveals that the source of funding and the direction in which research was guided were heavily influenced by the colonial situation. Firstly, it should be recalled that profits made by Europe from Africa represented investable surpluses. The profits are not merely an end in itself. Thus, the East and West African countries board invested in British government stock, while the commercial banks and insurance companies invested in government bonds, mortgages, and industrial shares. These investment funds acquired from the colonies spread to many sectors of the metropole and benefited industries had nothing to do with the processing of colonial products. So again, he's like, look, they collected money and then they put it into safer industries. They collected money from a volatile market and put it in less volatile markets. Okay. Okay. It's like if I have money in Tanzania, I want to make some money, obviously, but I know it's volatile. Like for instance, I told you about my restaurant. The other day, the restaurant, power went out, and the city was slow on restoring power, so it was probably like out for like a week or something. And remember that the business is not even booming. Okay? So the power is out for like a week or something. Right? The workers are all pissed. You know, oh, blah, 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 we can't go to work, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's a volatile market. But if you have money in the bank, right, where it's like, hey, look, we're going to guarantee you, at that point in time, it could have been like, we're going to guarantee you 10%, right? That's a good deal. We're going to guarantee you 10% profit. So you take out their surplus and you put it somewhere where you get 10%. Where you get 20% a year. And of course, the government puts that money in something that they find profitable too, which might be science. And that's perfectly understandable. Like, I don't know what these socialists want. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I do not know what they want. And that's why I say I can't read this by myself because I just get pissed. And sometimes I would just like, I would just screenshot this, be like, look, guys, I know nobody cares on social media, but still, it's just like I'm pissed. However, it is not really pissed because, I don't get emotional, but still. Well, I try not to get emotional. So, however, it is easier to trace the impact of colonial exploitation on industries directly connected with colonial imports. Such industries had to improvise the kind of machinery which most effectively utilized colonial raw materials. That led, for example, to machinery for crushing palm kernels, to a process for utilizing the less delicately favored coffee by turning it into a soluble powder, namely instant coffee. Merchants and industrialists, he's talking about instant coffee. Merchants and industrialists also considered ways in which colonial raw material could be modified to meet specifications of European factories in quality and quantity. An example of this type would be the case taken by the Dutch in Java, by the Americans in Liberia, to breed and graft new varieties of rubber plants, yielding more and being more resistant to disease. Ultimately, the search for better quality raw materials merged with the search for a source of raw materials which would make European capitalism less dependent on colonial areas, and that led to synthetics. So, yeah, okay. Like, again, he's like, well, because you guys didn't want to search for raw materials, you guys then innovated synthetics. So that's how we inspired your science. Y'all got instant coffee because you didn't, you got because you enjoyed the coffee in our country. And you guys got Java and new rubber plants because there were too many diseases. And like, what? Ugh. And is somebody laughing? Is anybody laughing? Maybe I'm not a funny guy. Alright, so in the sphere of shipping, it can readily be appreciated that certain, like, look at this, in the sphere of shipping, well, because we were so far, you guys found a way to get to us faster. like, I'm pretty sure that's what you want to say. Alright, so in the sphere of shipping, it can be I hope it's not they were able to take more from us. Oh gosh. Alright. It can readily be appreciated that certain technological modification innovations will be connected with the fact that such a high proportion of shipping was used to tie together colonies and metropoles. Ships had to be refrigerated to carry perishable goods. They had to make special holes for bulky or liquid cargo, such as palm oil, and the transport of petroleum from the Middle East. North Africa and other parts of the world led to oil tankers as a special class of ships. The design of ships and the nature of their cargo, in turn, affected the kind of port installations in the metropoles. They're like, oh, in order to exploit us better, you guys made ships that were better at taking petroleum, and you guys made ports that were better at docking ships, and you guys, like you guys had refrigerated, Brother McCarthy could appreciate refrigerated trucks. You guys developed refrigerated trucks because you kept taking stuff from us that you needed to refrigerate. Like, shut up. Just taking credit for things because people are using you. It's just ridiculous. Where connections were remote or even apparently non-existent, it can still be claimed that colonialism was a factor in the European technological revolution. As science blossomed in the present century, its interconnection became numerous and complex. It is impossible to trace the origin of every idea and every invention, but it is well understood by serious historians of science that the growth of body of scientific knowledge and its application to everyday life is dependent upon a large number of forces operating within the society as a whole, and not just upon the ideas which give within given branches of science. With the rise of imperialism, one of the most potent forces with metropolitan capitalist societies was precisely emanating from colonial or semi-colonial areas. The above considerations apply fully to any discussion of the military aspect of imperialism, the protection of empire being one of the crucial stimulants added to the science of armaments in a society that was already militaristically inclined ever since the feudal era. The new colonial dimension to European military preoccupation was notably sharp. Yeah, military. Let's talk about it. Science of armaments. Let's talk about it. The new colonial dimension to European military preoccupation was generally noticeable in the sharp naval rivalry between Britain, Germany, France, and Japan before and during the First World War. That rivalry over colonies and spheres of capitalist investment produced new types of armed naval vessels such as destroyers and submarines. By the end of the Second World War, military research had become the most highly organized branch of scientific research, and one that was subsidized by the capitalist states from the profits of international exploitation. What's interesting is I'm not 100% sure, but oh no. I was gonna say submarines, but I know that there apparently there was a submarine. They might have been developing submarines in the American Civil War, but I think submarines are probably a German invention. I'm not 100% sure if it was the Civil War, but I feel like there was this innovation that was going on. I mean, I don't think they used it in the American Civil War, but I think that there was something. I remember something vaguely about that, but it could have been something else. Because, like, again, it's like I've been out of high school for like ever, you know, like I've been out of high school forever. All right, so during the interwar years, Africa's foremost contribution to the evolution of organizational techniques in Europe was to the strengthening of monopoly capital. Before the War of 1914, the Pan-Africanists Duze Muhammad Ali and W. Du Bois recognized that money capital was the leading element in imperialist expansion. The most thorough and the best known analysis of this phenomenon was made by the Russian... Oh, yeah, Lenin. So Lenin's actually not bad. So, let me just find it. Africa's foremost contribution to the evolution of organizational techniques in Europe was the strengthening of monopoly capital. Before the War of 1914, the Pan-Africanists Duze Muhammad Ali and W. Du Bois recognized that monopoly capital was the leading element in imperialist expansion. The most thorough and best known analysis of this phenomenon was made by the Russian revolutionary leader Lenin. Lenin was virtually prophetic because as the colonial age advanced, it became more and more obvious that those who stood to benefit most were the monopoly concerns, and especially those involved in finance, right? So yeah, so I mean, even Garvey praised Lenin. I personally try not to, but Lenin's not bad. All right, so like he's all right. Plus, it's hard to even articulate it. It's hard to say it, but you know, yeah. All right. Looks like Matron's here. Shout out to Matron. So Matron says the European put the game down, make your money hot and fast, and put it into something that will last. Yup, that's how you industrialize dollars. Yup, put it down, make that money hot and fast, and put it into something that will last. That's it. Get your money. And then make it, you know, just make it earn you. Just earn some money, like just because you know you could. I said it in another way, right? There are two types of people. There are the people who are dependent, and the people who are interdependent. Okay, and the reality is this: you don't have any money. For some reason, you don't have any money. You might be a dependent. Okay, and if you guys see about the strategy thing, if you guys peep that, you know, little section of my book, you realize that being dependent can make you, I say, easier to mislead, only because I didn't want to say, which probably more accurately, can make you easier exploited. You know, easier to exploit. Okay? Being dependent can make you easier to exploit. You know, and that's just the reality. Now, I don't put down exploit right now. I'm thinking about it. I don't put it down right now because, one, I don't like the word exploitation, obviously. Two, I don't like the idea that we are exploiters or we might exploit each other. But like, yeah, like that's the reality of the world. You know, a pretty woman comes along and says, in fact, I can tell you guys right now. So I decided to unblock some of the oh snap, Kanjiverse is here. Kanjiverse, that's the legend. Anyway, but I was telling you guys about the like I decided to unblock some people in Tanzania. Right? You unblock them and all they do is write you and ask you for money. Okay? So just today, this was 45 minutes before I podcast. Somebody wrote me, Oni mimi niamwa nayomba ni saidie hela yadawa, right? So what she's saying is, Oni, I am sick. Please send me money for please send me money for medicine, right? Now, again, I blocked this lady for like months, like 4 months, 3 months. She just writes me, oh, I'm sick, so on and so forth. Now, there's another woman I blocked, right? What does she write me today? Actually, only 7 minutes later, she says, hello, Nayomwa Mimi, right? I'm sick, right? Nayomwa is I'm sick, right? So I say pole, right? And she says, Nayomba, which means please give me pesa money, niende hospital, right? I want to go to the hospital, right? Or no, please give me money so I can go to the hospital, right? And that's it. Now about these women, they're pretty. If I were in now, me personally, not in my mindset right now, but what I'm saying is that a lot of men, or some men, or what I'm saying is this: you being dependent on somebody, like this is just generally information. You being dependent, somebody can exploit that. Now, I'm not saying I would exploit that, because I kind of told them, Sina hella, I don't have any money, right? But what I'm saying is that there are plenty of dudes who are like, sure, if I can get something. You understand? Sure, let's meet up. Now, I don't go by that philosophy, obviously, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, like if you don't have money, right? You put yourself in a situation where you could get where, like, yeah, somebody can exploit you, and that's just the reality of the world. And again, like, not everybody's exploiting, not everybody's misleading, but some people will, and that's just the fact of life. So I think Countyverse asked, what's wrong with Lenin? Now, again, Lenin, the only thing about Lenin is that he's white, honestly. So that's really that's really the entirety of why I wouldn't pray. Like, I just don't praise white folk, I think they can do that for themselves. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's like, yeah, if you there are, like for instance, like, I like certain Eurasian countries, but I'm not going to go around praising them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need that soundbite. But like, yeah, like you said, Lenin is considered one of the better of the Europeans, but like, he's still European, so that's pretty much it. Matron says, but yeah, appreciate brother Countyverse for coming through. Appreciate everybody, real talk. But I haven't seen Countyverse in forever, so shout out to that brother. Matron says, make money by being a middleman. Those ships made money too. Why not get into transportation as a way to make money? Yep. But the thing about transportation, though, is that it's also really expensive, but like that's the thing, though. It's like, the more capital you get, the more you can afford bigger capitalistic ventures, and then not capitalistic adventures, but the more you could afford, and the more you can afford, the more you can the more you can kind of profit. You know what I mean? But again, like, the rate of profit is questionable. Like somebody was just telling me the other day, they said, hey, if you pay this much money, you can get a house and then rent it to 4 people. And I was like, what kind of rent? And the rent was tiny. And I was like, that thing would cost 10 years to pay back, or like 8 years to pay back. But it's like, to them it was just like, yeah, but you'll still have, like, obviously after 8 years you'll just make raw profit, but like, it really comes to, but like, again, you can't get that opportunity until you have the great amount of capital. So that's another thing about it. Major says, we can't take credit for them developing things selfishly. We should be more selfish, less friendly, and be racist, only benefiting our designated group. Exactly. Exactly. Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, this is what I'm trying to write in my book, because I realized that, like, because you see how Matron says be racist, you can't say that, and the city is very not the city, but America is really trying to say, don't be racist. Oh, black people, don't be racist. Don't be racist. Racism is bad. Look how ugly racism is. But it's like, that's what's working for America. You know? Controversy says, should we treat Greenberg the same way as we treat Lenin? He's a whitey too. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't personally praise, like, I just don't personally praise white folk. You know what I'm saying? But obviously, white, like for instance, even now when I'm talking about strategy, like, I can't help but, you know, give Sun Tzu his props, because what he wrote about war was pretty dang good. But like, even me, I'm like hesitant to even use his name, because it's like, okay, you know, like okay, you know what I mean? Like I mean, but it's just me being I'm a little bit, you know, on the I'm a little bit on that, you know, just looking for my legacy side. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm on that long-term thing, but I completely, but like, it is okay to, I think at one point I do point out Lenin did say something that was pretty interesting about what communism means, and it's just like, you got to give him his props for that too, you know, about full electricity and that kind of stuff. So Major says they tell us not to do what they do because it's working for them. Exactly, and that's what I say about strategy. You're supposed to, you keep the other person ignorant. Like, that's what my chapters. I might as well show you guys the chapter. I feel like I don't know if I used the name of Lenin, because I was just a little bit hesitant to use a European's name before I used an African's name. You know, just on that tip, because I try not to use anybody's name. But like, I think I might have used Lenin's name actually. So I'll see. But like, Sun Tzu, I can show you guys this chapter because it's just really critical. At some point, I thought I wasn't going to. But like, I can show you guys what I was writing right before I got into this thing. So this is a little preview of the book I'm working on, you know. Let's see if I can, how do you switch this? I think it's this one. Oh no, this is the diagnostics. This John B, it's like you just can't click around randomly. Alright, so it says, look, so you guys see, usually I would say Sun Tzu. So in the Book of Power, I did say Sun Tzu. Like, I did quote these two quotes in the Book of Power, and I attributed to Sun Tzu. In fact, I can actually show you guys that too, if you, because like, I literally just copied it from my book. I can show you guys. In fact, it's not even just copied from the Book of Power. It's also copied from the pro-black perspective, you know. So this was actually a podcast that I did back in the day that I put into the Book of Power. I can show you guys. So I literally just copied it, one thing to the other. So look, this is it in the Book of Power. So it says, now the next Eurasian I want to bring up is Sun Tzu, and you heard of Sun Tzu. He wrote what you call The Art of War. And in this, The Art of War, he gives the most insightful phrase of war from a Eurasian perspective. All warfare is based on deception. All warfare is based on deception. He further says, hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. And when we are far away, we must make him believe we are near. But the main thing is all warfare is based on deception. And of course, I said, you know, I continued all that kind of stuff. So you guys can check this out in the Book of Power, obviously. But what I decided to do, I changed my tone, obviously, in this next book, and we're talking about strategy. So it's like, be strategic, as the ignorant and dependent are easier to mislead. And like, I'm debating between whether using exploit. And of course, I don't say Sun Tzu's name right now because I'm not sure if I used anybody's name in this book yet. So I'm thinking about it. I might say his name, I might not. It's not really, like, he's not copywritten, you know, so it doesn't matter because it was 2,500 years ago. But whatever. So he says, all warfare is based on deception. Eurasian general wrote that insight about 4,500 years ago. They further explained, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make them believe we are near. So this deception at its core relies on a basic flaw of humanity. Okay, there's a basic flaw we all have. We exist in two worlds, one real and one imagined, but the real is not always known. Now, there was different ways to write this. really difficult to narrow it down, but this is how I'm settling it so far. So this is the first draft. Don't feel too connected to it. It's supposed to change, right? So explain that. When humans do not know the real world, they imagine one. You get what I'm saying? You hear a knocking. So you imagine what it is. You don't know what it is. Is it the door? Is it the thing? You don't know, right? But like if you know what it is, if you see that I'm just knocking the table, okay, you know what it is, right? Or when I said it's a table, but was it a table? I don't know, right? You don't know. You just imagine it is. So knowing the real world and inspiring imaginary ones are twin pillars of strategy, right? And so this kind of encompasses this, right? So choosing to be strategic. Choose to be strategic. Understand that the ignorant and dependent are easier to mislead than the knowledgeable and the independent. Okay? Obscuring knowledge is the general explained, and forcing dependence are common stratagems. Now, actually, I'll still look up the word stratagem. I don't even know what it means. But anyway, they are applied in nearly every human endeavor. Four of the primary interests are religion. I wanted to talk about religion, so I tried to squeeze it in. Government, schools, and relationships, because they discourage strategy while employing it. So these four, among other things, say, hey, don't be strategic while they do it. But I said this because Matron, what Matron was saying, which was they tell us not to do what's working for them. You know what I mean? They tell us not to do what's working for them. And that's pretty much, that's the basis of strategy. Based on deception, based on tricking people. Based on making people believe that the imagined world, basically based on making people believe in an imaginary world that you might not even believe in. You know what I mean? The thing about religion that I wanted to point out was that religion says, hey, look, you give me, or I'm going to talk about the Abrahamic religions, right? But the Abrahamic religions tell you, hey, look, you give me 10% of your income, okay? And I'll get you into a good afterlife. Oh, man, that afterlife is sweet, man. I'm telling you, man. Ooh, you get to do this, you get to do that, you get to do this. Oh, man, you're going to have this big thing. You're going to have this. They're telling you to do that. This is inspired by this conversation I was having where this brother was like, hey, look, man. Basically the brother was like, yeah, maybe there's a good way to do religion versus a bad way to do religion. Maybe if you do a religion and you share the truth with people, that might be a better thing than doing a religion and sharing lies with people. And it's like, no! The best thing to do is to share lies. If you're going to do the religion thing, the best thing to do is share lies. Because it's a strategy for obscuring knowledge. If I go to somebody and say, look, man, if somebody says, let's say my son, although my son would never do this, but let's say my son says, hey, what happens after I die? Right? Forecast says, what's up? What's up, Forecast? So if my son says, hey, what happens? Look, when you die, father, what happens? Right? And of course he doesn't sound like that, but still, right? Or if I die, when blah blah blah, whatever. I don't know. My point is that if I go to my son and I say, look, man, ain't nothing happening after you die. What the fuck what are you talking about? Or if I say, I don't know what happens after you die, right? I can't then scare him with an afterlife. Or I can't force him to give me money. Obviously, it's my son, so he's not giving me money anyway. But I can't force him to give me money for a better afterlife. You know what I mean? There is not one human being on this planet who can tell you about an afterlife. Let alone, no, there's not one human being on this planet that can tell you about an afterlife. But if that can tell you truthfully about an afterlife. But every one of these religious leaders, right, can explain to you what it looks like for you. Especially the ones that are making money. They can tell you, oh yeah. If you like for instance, the Islamic case is the one I'm familiar with, right? It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna have tons of women. You explode yourself. This is the misleading thing, right? You explode yourself in an American embassy, in front of the American embassy. You put on these bonds, you explode yourself in the American embassy. You're gonna have a bunch of women lining up to please you for the rest of eternity. That shit don't make no sense. But, and it probably don't make any sense to the person who's doing that. But they say, look, if you're ignorant and dependent, and so they want to keep you ignorant and dependent. I think I went. See, I could go forever on my own book, right? Well, y'all let me know what y'all think about my book, by the way. But anyway, that's that. But like I want people to, because what Mason said was just truth, and I like I said, I want to publish this book. Is it gonna make me a lot of profit? Probably not. I just told my son yesterday, oh yeah, shit. If you like money, you like spending money, you better help me write this book. I don't know. But as far as I can tell, this is the stuff that nobody wants you to read. You see what I'm saying? And the thing is this too. Even if people do want me to read it, let's say that. Let's just pretend, right? The thing about the strategic thing is this. That should help me with my own marketing. Because I'm also a little too forthcoming, too honest. It's like, now granted, I don't know how I could even hide that, like how to obscure knowledge, but that's what everybody else does. They just hide the truth. They just hide the truth. Oh yeah, whatever. But it is what it is. We'll talk about it when it can happen, and of course, I'm going to recommend everybody reads the book when they can. But of course, you can't read it now, so let's just go on. All right, so I think we only have a few more pages, but shout out to everybody who came through. Africa plus Asia and Latin America contributed to the elaboration of the strategies of which competition among small companies gave way to domination by a small handful of firms in various economic activities. It was on the Indian trade routes that shipping companies first started the conference lines in 1875. This monopoly practice spread rapidly to the South African trade and reached a high pitch in West Africa in the early years of the century. On the commercial side, it was in West Africa that both the French and the English derived considerable experience in pooling and market sharing, apart from the fact that little companies were steadily being gobbled up by bigger ones from the beginning to the end of colonialism. It was in South Africa that there emerged the most carefully planned structures of interlocking directorates, holding companies and giant corporations which were multinational, both in their capital subscription and through the fact that their economic activities were dispersed in many lands. Individual entrepreneurs like Oppenheimer made huge fortunes from the South African soil, but Southern Africa were never really in the era of individual and family business characteristic of Europe and America up to the early parts of the century. The big mining companies were impersonal professional things. They were rationalized in terms of personnel, production, marketing, advertising, and they could undertake long-term commitments. At all times, interproductive forces gave capitalism its drive towards expansion and domination. It was a system which expanded, but in addition, one can see in Africa and in Southern Africa, in particular, the rise of capitalist superstructure manned by individuals capable of consciously planning the exploitation of resources right into the next century and aiming at racist domination of the black people of Africa until the end of time. Yep. I mean, of course. Like, of course, white people are gonna wanna, like, why would they not? Anyway. Ever since the 15th century, Europe was in a strategic command of world trade and of legal and organizational aspects of the movement of goods between continents. Europe's power increased with imperialism because imperialism meant investments, and investments with or without colonial rule gave European capitalists control over production within each continent. The amount of benefits to capitalism increased accordingly, since Europe could determine the quantity and quality of different raw materials, inputs which would need to be brought together in the interest of capitalism as a whole and of bourgeois class in particular. For instance, sugar production in the West Indies was joined in the colonial period by cocoa production within Africa, so that both merged into the chocolate industry of Europe and North America. In the metallurgical field, iron ore from Sweden, Brazil, or Sierra Leone could be turned into a different type of steel with the addition of manganese from the Gold Coast or chrome from southern Rhodesia. Such examples could be multiplied almost indefinitely to cover the whole range of capital production in the colonial period. So again, they find sugar in West Indies, cocoa in Africa, and they make chocolate in Europe and North America. And so we're like, ew, you got it from us. Or they get iron ore from Sweden, and and turn the iron into steel by using manganese from Gold Coast or chrome from Southern Rhodesia. And it's like you took the profit from Gold Coast and Southern Rhodesia. But like you have to do it on your own. You can't you have to do it on your own. You have to produce these things on your own, and then people could say, "Oh yeah, like they got the steel." Like it's just like I don't know. It's just weird at this point. It's really just weird at this point. What the freak? Somebody wrote a tweet on whose phone was that? Oh, it was my phone. Somebody wrote a tweet saying I was a liar randomly. I think. Yeah, anyway. So, as John Stuart Mills... oh, no, they said somebody else was a liar. So, as John Stuart Mills said, the trade between England and West Indies in the 18th century was like the trade between town and country. In the present century, the links are even closer, and it's more marked than the town is living off the countryside. Okay, so the trade between England and the West Indies was like the trade between town and country. So, town and country are two important aspects of a country. Of a nation, right? In the previous century, the links are even closer, and it's more marked that the town, Europe, is living off the countryside, Africa, Asia. When it said that the colonies should exist for the metropoles by producing raw materials and buying manufactured goods, the underlying theory was to introduce an international division of labor covering working people everywhere. That is to say, up to that point, each society allocated to its own members particular functions in production. Some hunted, some made clothes, some built houses. But with colonialism, the capitalists determined what types of labor the workers should carry on in the world as large. Africans were to dig minerals out of the subsoil, grow agricultural crops, collect natural products, and perform a number of odds and ends such as bicycle repairing. Inside of Europe, North America, and Japan, workers would refine the minerals and raw materials and make the bicycles. So this is actually pretty interesting. So when I was a leftist, right, I was actually an ultra leftist. So the ultra leftists. Now, if you talk to any socialist, right, you bring up Maoism, third worldism, okay? And they say, no, those guys are lunatics. You know what I'm saying? But like when I was in college, I think it was in college or high school, one of the two, I was like, I really thought, wow, I just hit a gold mine on these leftists. But basically, the way how Maoism, third worldism goes is that it says there's no proletariat versus bourgeois occupation, like class conflict. The class conflict is really the third world and the first world, where the first world is the bourgeois nation and the third world are the proletariat nation. And so the real class struggle is between the first and the third world. You know? And actually, there's not going to be a revolution in the first world as much as there would be a revolution in the third world. And, you know, the proof in the pudding was that there were no first world revolutions, the socialist revolutions. Like all the socialist revolutions were third world in the sense of Russia, China, which would be the two biggest ones today, and all the other ones obviously being third world, like Cuba and so on and so forth, right? But like those two examples were not first world or nations, you know? Now, obviously, I'm now in the African conscious sphere where it's like, okay, I'm not, you know, third world in a sense of, you know, Russia and China being, you know, in the same category, you know, POC, if you will, although Russia's obviously European. But still, yeah, but like back in the day, that's what I would go by. So what he's saying right now is kind of the premise of the third world is the Maoism third world is idea, which is instead of, you know, oh, inside of the West you have the proletariat and bourgeoisie, you don't have that anymore. Or if you do, it's really limited. What you have is the first world is mostly, well, not really bourgeoisie per se, but mostly they're not the proletariat as depicted by Marx. You know, so it's a pretty interesting tangent. You know, of course I'm saying that for myself, but anyway, just interesting that, you know, like it's just an ideology that I once associated with, but like obviously I found it to be obsolete for African people, and so I don't really talk about it too much anymore. We see everybody saying peace to each other. So the international division of labor brought about by imperialism and colonialism ensured that there would be a maximum increase in the level of skills in the capitalist nations. It took mainly physical strength to dig the minerals from and to farm the African soil, while the extraction of the metal from the ores and the subsequent manufacture of finished goods in Europe promoted more and more technology and skills there as time went on. Take the iron and steel industry as an example. Modern steel manufacture derives from the Siemens. Well, okay. Okay, Siemens. I'm just like, what? Siemens open hearth system and the Bessemer process, which were both already in existence in the second half of the last century. They both underwent major modification, transforming steel manufacture from intermittent operations to something requiring huge continuous electrical furnace. In more recent years, skilled workmen have been replaced by automation and computerization, but altogether the gains in technology and skill were immense as compared with the years before imperialism got underway. Iron ore was not one of the Africa's major exports in the colonial days, and it may therefore appear to be a relevant example. However, iron was very significant in the economy of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and North Africa. It can be used to illustrate the trend by which the International Division of Labor allowed technology and skills to grow in the metropoles. Furthermore, it must be recalled that Africa was an important source of the minerals that went into making steel alloys, notably manganese and chrome. Manganese was essential in the Bessemer process. It was mined in several places in Africa, with the Nautu mine of the Gold Coast having the largest single manganese deposit in the world. So again, I want to talk about the resources in Africa at some point. And so this book is actually pretty helpful in terms of that. Because I do want to, because I think this is still useful information if we're trying to do something, good in Africa. American companies owned the Gold Coast and North African mines and used the product in the steel industry of the USA. Chrome from South Africa and Southern Rhodesia also played a similar role in steel metallurgy, being essential for the manufacture of stainless steel. Columbite was another of Africa's minerals valuable for the creation of steel alloys. Being highly heat resistant, one of its principal uses was in making steel for jet engines. First of all, it was the rapid development of European industry and technology which caused Columbite to assume value. It had been a discarded byproduct of tin mining in Nigeria up to 1952. Then, once it was utilized, it gave further stimulus to European technology in the very sophisticated sphere of aero engines. Now, again, you got to pay attention to what he's saying right here. Like, you got to pay attention. It was a discarded byproduct of tin mining in Nigeria. Like, we don't realize that a lot of what's valuable is subjective. Like the one man's trash is another man's treasure. A lot of value is subjective. And not understanding that value is subjective is where we mistake and say, oh, well, look how much profit they're getting. Like, literally, you have this Columbite. Now, maybe it's the Europeans said that they discarded it. I don't know. Well, actually, no. Let's be real. If Columbite is good for jet engines, okay? Columbite is good for jet engines. If a people do not have jet engines, is Columbite good for them? And you might say, the only reason why it's good for them is if they can sell it to people who have jet engines. If the only value you have for Columbite is you can sell it for people with jet engines, then the people with the jet engines are going to buy the Columbite at whatever price they want. Because you're not using it. And all you can do with it is discard it. And we just have to come to terms with this, because when you don't come to terms, when you say, oh man, you see how they exploit you, you were throwing away this thing, right? You were using tin because that's what you wanted. Tin was good for you, right? What the fuck is this? He also said, you were using tin and now all of a sudden, and they're not paying you for your Columbite. You were throwing away the tin, you were throwing away the Columbite, but they should be paying you millions of dollars for the Columbite because now they can make jet engines and they can sell the jets for millions of dollars. So they should pay you millions of dollars for the Columbite because otherwise, it's like, no, that's not how the world works. That's not how it works. Anyway, I don't want to just, you guys get what I'm saying. We only have so many pages left. So obviously, according to the International Division of Labor prevailing under colonialism, it was the American, Canadian, British, and French workers who had access to the skills involved in working with columbite rather than Nigerian workers who dug the ore out of the ground. For certain reasons, columbite fell off sharply in demand after a few years, but during the time it had contributed towards making the European metallurgists even more proficient and experienced. In that way, it was helping to promote self-sustained growth and to reduce the gap which is evident in any comparison of developed and undeveloped countries. So again, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, well, we threw away columbite, and the Europeans, they worked on it. So because they worked on it, they became more proficient and experienced. That furthered the gap between us. Well, who threw it away? And the thing is this, we would put him in producing this thing for thousands of years. You don't even know, not thousands of years, I shouldn't say that because we're the controversies here, so he's going to tell you. He's going to tell you weren't producing that for thousands of years. Well, you guys know what I'm saying. You're going to produce a tin for who knows how long, right? But instead of, but you didn't do the research for what it's worth. Okay? You didn't get the proficiency with the columbite. Now, you got the proficiency with the tin, which is good. You didn't get the proficiency with the columbite. That's okay. But you can't come, 100 years later, or 30 years later, 50 years later, and say, well, the Europeans, they got more proficient and that's why they have this big gap between us. Like, you had the opportunity. But sometimes you just gotta take an L. And like, I don't blame them. Like I said, it could just be dirt. A lot of these things that we value is really just dirt. It's really just trash. Like, if you ever see a picture of what coltan looks like, it's just mixed in with dirt. And it's like, yeah, if you could find some superconductivity use for coltan, then obviously it's worth more than the dirt around it. But if you cannot find superconductivity uses, then it's not really worth you collecting it. Because you can't do anything with it. Like with the columbite. They could have easily just gathered the columbite together and just kept the storage, let's say 80 tons of columbite. But what are they going to do with it? You're just going to have a storage of, maintenance of 80 tons of columbite for what? And you might be like, oh, I'm going to sell it. A lot of these Europeans didn't know what to do with columbite before the jet fuel, the jet energy thing. Because like, what do you expect? Copper too fell neatly into the category under discussion. Unskilled production by Africans was required to get the ore from export, followed by refinement in European capitalist plant. Copper was Africa's chief mineral export. Being an excellent conductor of electricity, it became an indispensable part of the capitalist electrical industry. It is an essential component of generators, motors, electrical locomotives, telephones, telegraphs, lights and power lines, motor cars, buildings, ammunition, radios, refrigerators, and a host of other things. The technological era tends to be defined by the principal source of power. Today, we speak of a nuclear age, since the potential of nuclear power is shown to be immense. The Industrial Revolution in Europe during the 18th and 19th century was the age of steam. In a parallel manner, the colonial epoch was the age of electricity. Therefore, the vital copper exports from Congo, northern Rhodesia, and other parts of Africa were contributing to the leading sector of European technology. From that strategic position, its multiplier effects were innumerable and were of incalculable benefit to capitalist development. Now, again, copper wiring, we all heard of that. We all know about that. But again, like, do you credit Africa for simply exporting copper or being exploited for copper? In the context of a discussion of raw materials, special reference must again be made to the military. African minerals played a decisive role both with regards to conventional weapons and with regard to the breakthrough to atomic and nuclear weapons. Like, again, African minerals, yeah, okay, but that's the minerals. Anyway. It was the Belgian Congo during the Second World War, and the USA began getting the uranium, which was prerequisite to the making of the first atomic bomb. In any case, by the end of... And again, you wouldn't blame Africa for the atomic bomb, but somehow you would give it credit for it, In any case, by the end of the colonial period, industry and the war machine into the colonizing nations have become so intertwined and inseparable that any contribution to one was a contribution to the other. Therefore, Africa's massive contribution to what initially appears as a peaceful pursuit is the making of copper wire and steel alloy ultimately took the shape of explosive devices, aircraft carriers, and so on. It was only after the European firearm reached a certain stage of effectiveness in the 19th century that it became possible for whites to colonize and dominate the whole world. Similarly, the invention of a massive array of new instruments of destruction in the metropole was both a psychological and a practical disincentive to colonized people seeking to regain power and independence. It would readily be recalled that the basic prop to colonialism in Africa and elsewhere was the gunboat diplomacy, which was resorted to every time that the local police and armed forces seemed incapable of maintaining the metropolitan law and colonial order affairs. From the viewpoint of the colonized, the strengthening of the military apparatus of the European powers through colonial exploitation was doubly detrimental. Not only did it increase the overall technological gap between the metropolitan and the colony, but it immeasurably widened the gap in the most sensitive area, which had to do with concepts such as power and independence. So they're like, because they were trying to exploit you, they became more powerful, and that's why they gotta, that's how we contributed to, like, that's how we helped out their country. Like, what are you talking about? it's like we were watching this thing yesterday, I think, or the boxer, his mother. So I guess he's the world champion now, but his mother was abusive to him. Let's say it that way, right? She would pay other kids to try to beat her son in a fight, and not in like an encouraging way, but in a way of like, I want you to injure my son, which is kind of weird. But anyway, it's like if we were to say, like, it's kind of like if you were to like give her credit, kind of. It's a little weird. Or like if you were to brag, it's just weird. It's just really weird. I mean, I don't even know how to articulate how weird it is, but it's like, yeah, the Europeans wanted to dominate you, so they made better weapons to dominate you, and therefore you receive credit for their better weapons. Like, no, that's not how it works. Let's see. There's no more comments. More greetings. So the International Division, so I take 9 more pages, so let's try to rush it. The International Division of Labor of the colonial period also ensured that there would be growth of employment opportunities in Europe. Apart from the millions of white settlers and expatriates who earned a livelihood in and from Africa, agricultural raw materials were processed in such a way as to form byproducts, constituting industries in their own rights. The number of jobs created in Europe and North America by the import of mineral ores from Africa, Asia, and Latin America can be seen from the massive employment role of institutions such as steelworks, motor car factories, alumina and aluminum plants, copper wire firms, etc. Furthermore, those in turn stimulated the building industry, the transport industry, the munition industry, and so on. The mining that went on in Africa left holes in the ground, and the pattern of agricultural production left African soils impoverished. But in Europe, agricultural and mineral imports built a massive industrial complex. In the earlier phases of human organization, production was scattered and atomized. That is to say, families preserved a separate identity while working for their upkeep. Over time, production became more social and interrelated in character. The making of a pair of shoes in a mature feudal trading economy involved a cattle rearer, a tanner, a leather, and a shoemaker. Instead of one peasant killing an animal. Sorry, I just got distracted. What the freak? I'm thinking to myself, if I'm in Africa, how am I going to do these podcasts? Because I just remember now that the internet is actually crap there, where I am. But anyway, so let's see what this says. Something about number of jobs created, blah blah blah. So this is something that Adam Smith talks about too. So he says, in the earliest phase of human organization, production was scattered and atomized. That is to say, families preserved a separate entity while working for their upkeep. Over time, production became more social and interrelated in character. Making of a pair of shoes in a mature feudal trading economy involved a cattle rearer, a tanner, a leatherer, and a shoemaker, instead of one peasant killing an animal and making himself a pair of shoes, as under self-sufficient communalism. The extent to which a society achieves this social interdependence, and you see some interdependence. So what I'm saying, there's dependence and interdependence. And making commonalities is an index of its development through specialization and coordination. Now, technically, this peasant killing an animal would be, I guess you could consider that independent. But like, it really depends on if you think that it's independent or not. Undoubtedly, European capitalism achieved more and more a social character in its production. It integrated the whole world, and with colonial experience as an important stimulus, it integrated very closely every aspect of its own economy, from agriculture to banking. But distribution was not social in character. The fruits of human labor went to given minority class, which was the white race and resident in Europe and North America. This is the crux of the dialectical process and development and undevelopment, and is evolved over the colonial periods. But yeah, like, of course, the Europeans developed a system that benefited Europeans. And like, to say, oh, it was not social in character. Distribution was not social in character. Okay. You know what I mean? Like I said, you have these people in Africa who are gonna be like, hey, let me get some money. I'm sick. Let me get some money. I need money, right? And it's like I said, if I go to Africa, I wanna have my own family, right? If the woman I'm involved with is sick, she'll get my money. But the woman I'm not involved with, and she's sick, she might not. Unless I have a lot of money. Now, when I don't have money, it's like, no, you're not gonna like like what happens when I'm sick? Who's gonna give me money? You know? Who's gonna pay for my medicine? That's dawa. Who's gonna pay for my medicine when I'm sick? Because if you're not, if you can't even pay for your medicine when you're sick, you're not gonna pay for my medicine. The example of Unilever as a major beneficiary of African exploitation. So let me just finish. I think it's just, I want to go to 60 of 89. That's about 2/3 of the way. So the example of Unilever as a major beneficiary of African exploitation. This was the, and by the way, because the last few pages are usually not full pages, I technically should not, but it's okay. This was necessary to follow African surplus through the channels of exploitation, such as banks and mining companies. So the non-monetary contribution which Africa made to European capitalism can be accurately traced by following the careers of the said companies. We offer below a brief outline of the relevant features of the development of a single firm, that of Unilever, relationship to its exploitation of the African resources and people. In 1885, while Africa was being carved up on the conference table, one William H. Lever started making soap on the Merseyside near Liverpool in England. He called his soap Sunlight, and in the swamps of his factory stood. And in the swamps where his factory stood, the township of Port Sunlight grew up. Within 10 years, the firm of Lever was selling 40,000 tons of soap per year in England alone, and was building an export business and factories in other parts of Europe, America, and the British colonies. Then came Lifebuoy, Lux, and Vim, and within another 10 years, Lever was selling 60,000 tons of soap in Britain, and in addition, had factories producing and selling in Canada, the USA, South Africa, Switzerland, Germany, and Belgium. However, soap did not grow in any of those countries. The basic item in its manufacture was stearin, obtained from oil and fats. Apart from animal tallow and whale oil, the desirable raw materials all came from the tropics, namely palm oil, palm kernel oil, groundnut oil, and copra. West Africa happened to be the world's greatest palm produce zone, and was also a major grower of groundnuts. So basically what he's saying is this. Look, you want to get into manufacturing. Okay? You want to get into manufacturing. This is an example of an individual who gets into manufacturing, creates a soap, and that soap sells it to Europe, America, and the British Indies, and eventually he sells it. 20 years working at this thing, right? 20 years. So for the first 10 years, he's selling, he starts off in a freaking swamp. Okay, he starts off in a swamp. It forms a little town, if you will, right? And then he's selling a whole bunch. He's producing a lot of soap. 40,000 tons of soap, and he's selling it to Europe, selling to white people. Okay, then 10 years later, he's selling about 50% more than he did the year before, and he has factories all over in different parts of the world, different parts of the European world. Okay, but he's using this stuff from, obviously he's utilizing material from different parts of the world, right? Some of it's from Africa, some of it's from the freaking ocean, whale oil. Okay? And it's like, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. And it's like, the socialist is going to tell this European, you're doing something bad. And it's like, well, what is he doing bad? Well, he's using material from the ocean, and he's using material from West Africa. And it's the irony of it is this: that the socialists want this same sort of system. They just want the profits on top of it. They still want to use groundnuts and palm oil from West Africa. They still want to use whale oil. Now, I would prefer if Africa just let itself be and be its own little industrial, spot. But again, even if let's say if I wanted to make soap in Tanzania, right? I might still need whale oil. I don't know. Or I might need some materials from out of Europe. I have no idea, honestly. I mean, hopefully I would only need stuff. Like, I might not only need stuff from Tanzania. It's another thing I might say. Because, like, again, you might need palm oil from West Africa. Anyway, in 1887, the Austrian firm of Schitz, okay, Schicht, which was later to be incorporated in the Unilever Combine, built the first palm kernel crushing mill in Austria. Okay, supplied with... So again, they have a palm kernel crushing mill. You don't, they do. Supplied with raw materials by a Liverpool firm of oil merchants. That was not simply coincidence, but part of the logic of imperialism and the opening of Africa as a raw material reservoir for Europe. As early as 1902, Lever sent out his own explorers to Africa, and they came to the decision that the Congo would be the most likely place to gain palm produce, because the Belgian government was willing to offer huge concessions of land with innumerable palm trees. Lever obtained the necessary concessions in Congo and brought in machinery to extract oil from palm kernels. Okay, so he gets... This guy's rich. Lever is rich, right? He's rich because he's selling soap to Europeans. He wants to sell soap cheaper. So he wants to cut back on his costs for raw materials. So how does he do that? He sends out... He pays people to explore Africa. Okay? He pays people to see, hey, where can I... Like, if I wanted to get this material cheaper, where can I get that from? They say, oh, the Congo. Why? Because Leopold is like... Maybe it's not Leopold. Maybe it's after Leopold. But still, Leopold is like, hey, or Belgian government is like, oh, we could give you that for cheap. Okay? And it's like, that's a problem. And I mean, I get... And I mean, again, it's not that it's not a problem per se. Like, again, like, it's like, why is a European... Like, it's like the socialist is complaining for the wrong reasons. You know? They're not complaining because it's a white person, per se. They're complaining because somebody's making a profit. With their own... With the money that they've made by providing us a product to their own people. Right? But the main palm oil exports came from areas on the coast, the north of the Congo. Therefore, in 1910, Lever purchased W.B. McIver, a small Liverpool firm in Nigeria. That was followed by acquisitions of two small companies in Sierra Leone and Liberia. Indeed, Lever, at that time called Lever Bros, got a foothold in every colony in West Africa. The first breakthrough occurred when Lever brought the Niger Company in 1920 for 8 million pounds. Then in 1929, the African and Eastern, the last big rival trading concern, was brought into partnership, and the result of the merger was called the United Africa Company. During the 1914 and 1918, Lever had begun making margarine, which required the same raw materials as soap, namely oils and fats. The subsequent year were ones in which such enterprises in Europe were constantly getting bigger through takeovers and mergers. The big names in soap and margarine manufacture on the European continent were two Dutch firms, Jurgens and Van der Berg, and the Austrian firms of Schitz and Centra. The Dutch company first achieved a dominant position, and then in 1929, the grand merger between their combine and Levers, who in the meantime had been busy buying out virtually all other competitors. The 1929 merger created Unilever as a single monopoly, divided for the sake of convenience into Unilever Ltd, registered in Britain, and Unilever NV, registered in Holland. For its massive input of oils and fats, Unilever depended largely on its UAC subsidiary, which was formed that very year. UAC itself never stopped growing. In 1933, it took over the important trading firm of G.B. Golovin. In 1936, it became the Swiss trading company on the Gold Coast. By that time, it was not relying simply on wild palms in the Congo, but had organized plantations. The lever faces in the USA drew their oil supplies mainly from the Congo, and in 1925, even before Unilever in the USA emerged as such, the lever works in Boston showed a profit of £250,000. Unilever flourished in war and peace. Only in Eastern Europe did the advent of socialism lead to the loss of factories through nationalization. So again, nationalization is taking over the factories other people might have invested in, which is a good thing. Again, it's a good thing. It's a good thing if you're the nationalizer, if you're the nation. It's obviously not a good thing if you're invested in it, but still, by the end of the colonial period, and that's why the capitalists fight against socialists, right? By the end of the colonial period, Unilever was a world force selling traditional soaps, detergents, margarines, lard, ghee, cooking oil, canned clothes, candles, glycerine, oil cakes, and toilet preparations such as toothpaste. From where did this giant octopus suck most of its sustenance? Let the answer be provided by the information division of Unilever House London. Most striking of all the post-war developments of Unilever has been the progress of the United Africa Company. In the worst of the Depression, the management of Unilever has never ceased to put money into UAC, justifying their action more general by faith in the future of Africa than by particular consideration of UAC's immediate prospects. Their reward has come with the post-war prosperity of the primary producer, which has made Africa a market of all kinds of goods, from frozen peas to motor cars. Unilever's center of gravity lies in Europe, but far and away its largest member, the UAC, is almost wholly dependent for its livelihood, represented by a turnover of 300 million on the well-being of West Africa. Okay. So again, he just seems to be like, oh yeah, Europeans profited. It's like, yeah. Like, yeah, the Europeans profited from colonialism. Forecast is asking Matron how she's doing. So in some instances, leveraged African enterprises made losses in the strict cost accounting sense. It took years before the Congo plantations paid for themselves and made a profit. It also took some time before the purchase of the Niger company in 1920 was financially justified. So again, he doesn't take this into account. While SCKN in Chad never showed worthwhile monetary profit. So again, you could buy a business and it doesn't show any profit. But even in the worst financial years, a subsidiary comprising the UAC were invaluable assets, and they allowed the manufacturing side of Unilever to have control over a guaranteed source of essential raw material. Of course, the UAC itself also provided handsome monetary dividends, but is the purpose here to draw attention not to the financial gains of UAC and Unilever, but to the way that exploitation of Africa led to multiple technical and organizational developments in Europe. So they were able to organize better because they could exploit, because they exploited us. Both the soap industry and the margarine industry had their own scientific and technical problems. Now, how long is this podcast? What the freak? Let me just double check. I'm getting hungry. I know my son getting hungry too, because he kind of just walked in like, But anyway, let me, I only have 3 more pages. Lucky some 57. So basically 2 more pages. Both the soap industry and the margarine industry had their own science, technical problems which had to be solved. Scientific advances more generally in response to real needs. Oils for margarine and for cooking purposes had to be deodorized. Substitutes had to be sought for natural lard. And when margarine was faced with competition from cheap butter, the necessity arose to find means of producing new high-grade margarine with added vitamins. In 1916, 2 leveraged experts published in the British Science Journal the result of tests showing the growth of animals fed with vitamins concentrates inside margarine. They kept in touch with Cambridge University scientists who pursued the problem. By 1929, the vitamin-rich margarine was ready for human consumption. So again, the universities play an important role in the advance of science, but also did the business people, With regard to soap and to a lesser extent margarine, it was essential to devise a process for hardening oils into fat, notably whale oil, but also vegetable oil. The process, referred to as hydrogenation, attracted the attention of scientists in the early years of the century. They were paid and urged on by rival soap companies, including Lever and other European firms, which later merged to form Unilever. One of the most striking illustrations of the technological ramifications of the process of colonizing colonialist raw materials is the field of detergents. Soap itself is a detergent or washing agent, but ordinary soap suffers from several limitations, such as a tendency to decompose in hard water and in acids. Those limitations could only be overcome by soapless detergents, without the kind of fatty base of previous soaps. While Germany was cut off from colonial supplies of oils and fats in the First Imperialist War, German scientists were spurred on to the first experiments in producing detergents out of coal tar. Later on, in the 1930s, chemical companies began making similar detergents on a larger scale, especially in the USA. 2 of the firms which immediately dropped into the detergent research were Unilever and Procter & Gamble, a soap combine with its headquarters in Cincinnati, USA. So we know Procter & Gamble. I think they made a... I'm not 100% sure, but I think they're the ones who made a vaccine recently, right? I'm not sure. But it was at first appear strange that though detergents were common predators to ordinary soap, they were nevertheless promoted by soap firms. Are they competitors to ordinary soap? I didn't know However, it is a practice of monopoly concerns to move into new fields which supplement or even replace their old businesses. That is, necessary to avoid their entire capital from being tied up in products that go out of fashion. The soap firms could not leave the detergents to chemical firms, or else their own hard soap flakes, or soap powders would have suffered, and they would not have been the ones with the new brands on the market. So great effort was put into the chemistry of detergents by Unilever, retaining to a considerable extent the vegetable oils, but modifying them chemically. That kind of research was not left to chance or private individuals. In 1960, Unilever had 4 main laboratories, 2 in England, 1 in Holland, and 1 in USA. These 4, together with other smaller research units, employed over 3,000 people, of whom about 1/3 were qualified scientists and technologists. So again, you could always, when you listen to this thing, you can also listen on a faster speed. The multiplier effect radiating from Unilever and its colonial exploitation can be traced with some accuracy. So again, the multiplier effect, that's what we did. Anyway, can be traced with some accuracy. When palm kernels were crushed, the residue formed the cake, which was excellent for livestock. One byproduct of the soap industry was glycerine, which was utilized in the making of explosives. Wow, okay, I didn't know that. Europeans killed themselves with some of the explosives, but some went into peaceful purposes, such as mining, quarrying, and construction. Several other products were linked to... he just says this so casually. Several other products were linked to soap through the common base in oil and fat, notably cosmetics, shampoo, perfume, shaving creams, toothpaste, dyes. As one writer put it, those byproducts served to broaden the commercial base of which Unilever listed, while making further use of the fund of knowledge already processed by the oils and fats technologists. Besides, these operations were creating hundreds of thousands of additional jobs for European workers. So that's actually the extent to which I'm going to read. I'm just going to highlight the next thing for the next chapter, and that's pretty much it. So that's pretty much the entirety of today's podcast. Appreciate you guys for coming through. It's a rare sight to see Controverse, but it's good to see Controverse. Afro Jam says they're eating and listening. That's what I'm saying. I need to eat too. Only problem is I can't eat and read, and that's just rude, you know. To talk with my mouth for all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna scroll up. I can't scroll to the top, I guess. So I know Kofi was here from Jump, and Brother Bakari was also here. Consider Cheek was here too, so shout out to Consider Cheek. I don't think I could scroll up and see anybody. Oh, I could. Okay, so Consider Cheek was here, so shout out to her. Ubuntum was here. Ubuntum also did a podcast just now, I guess. He might still be live, so you guys can check him out if you want to. He said he had some good news about the Abo Nation. That's pretty cool. Brother Bakari, like I said, Matron was here. Shout out to Matron, always bringing wisdom. Controverse, he's here. Controverse and I should be doing a podcast. I just don't know on what topic. So that's a thing to concern about. But other than that, we have Forecast is here. Kofi, about that. Okay, Afrojam was here also. Afrojam was eating and reading. So actually, it's not really 8 out of 9. So apparently this book, I thought I was going to read faster. So this book is actually ridiculously long. So you see we're at 290 of 140. So I think there's like 8 chapters. And so I was going to do like a chapter a day. Because that's what I used to do. But like it would have made like 5-hour, 6-hour podcasts. Because some of these chapters are huge. Like this chapter alone was 90 pages. And we only read 30 pages. And it was like 2 hours and 30 minutes. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to do that again. Because sometimes, like on some weeks, like for instance, my son's supposed to be brought back, then he's gonna disrupt it, and I have to shower him and all that kind of stuff. So I was just like, because when he's at his mom's house, he's not like you got to shower him. Anyway, so I was like, okay, so really we're only on chapter 5, and there's like, I want to say there's 8-9 chapters. So there's a lot more of this podcast, unfortunately. But it is what it is. I'm wondering how to do this in a faster way, honestly. But it is what it is. But yes, it's not just one. I just don't update the 9 yet because I don't know what I'm going to update it with. Other than that, Forecast says it's a good podcast and it's informative. So I appreciate that, Forecast. Forecast is like a historian. So it's good to hear from a historian, that kind of stuff. And of course, Kofi says good stream. So thanks, Kofi. Appreciate you for coming through. So that's pretty much it, though. Thanks, fam, for the likes. I appreciate the likes. I appreciate the views. You know, I actually can't even monetize this thing because I don't get any views. But it is what it is. I mean, I get why I don't get any views. I'm reading I'm reading how Europe and develop Africa. So, but it's all good. It's all good. But thanks everybody for coming through. And appreciate your time. Obviously, Shemi Hotep, Uncle Jas, and Neb Neb. Amen. Ma'at. Dua that shit.